Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's conversation with Scott Matyjaszek of Artifacts. This is one of our virtual programs in this year's M&T Bank Clothesline Online Festival. This festival has been our largest fundraiser for more than 60 years, and although we've had to pivot to a virtual format this year, our goals are still the same. We want to highlight and support the arts and our artists, so thank you all for joining us today. And I just want to mention a few housekeeping items before we get started. We do have a live captioner with us today, so if you would like captions, you can click the closed captioning CC button that's found at the bottom of your screen. We also will have time to answer any questions that you have for Scott throughout his presentation today, as well as at the end of his presentation, so be sure to send in your questions. You can do that by clicking the Q&A button that's also at the bottom of your screen. And finally, at the end of today's webinar, your browser should take you to a short survey about your experience. So please let us know what you think and how it was. Your feedback is super valuable for us, especially in this digital format. It's my pleasure now to introduce our presenter today. So Scott Matyjaszek is from Michigan originally, and he moved to Rochester in 1971. He creates, as he describes, 3D photo sculptures by taking original photographs and hand cutting, assembling, and layering them to create depth and perspective within the frame. His work has been referred to as similar to trompe l'oeil, as well as being called urban landscapes, which transform what might be viewed as the dullest subjects imaginable, old walls, into elegant deductive composition. In addition to his photo sculptures, he also makes photographic jewelry, which is three-dimensional miniature sculptures in the forms of earrings and pins. So Scott, welcome. Thank you for being with us today. I'm going to pass it off to you now to tell us what you know about your work.
Hello. Good afternoon to everybody, and good morning to those on the East Coast. I do have a few people out there who are probably watching. You know, just before this webinar today, I had been thinking last night about some things that were coming from a stream of consciousness. And although they're indirectly related to what I do, there was an interesting tie-in on some things. I just wanted to mention a couple like historical things. Like most people may or may not know that the first camera was invented in 1816. And in 1900 was the first mass-marketed camera, which was the Kodak Brownie. In 1927, the first TV was invented, which was over 93 years ago. So this was actually the first electronic device with screen for communications. And I'll tell you why that's relevant in just a moment. And so, and in 1928, TVs were made available to the public. In 1946 was the first mass-marketed first mass-produced TVs which were brought to market. Now, the other interesting tie-in, which for me, it's like I'm here communicating on electronic device with a screen. And it got me thinking about, and I can't tell you exactly why, but I thought about Romper Room. And some of you may or may not remember Romper Room. I remember Romper Room with Miss Nancy. So 67 years ago, on February 9th, 1953, Romper Room debuted with Miss Nancy, and actually was the first syndicated program for teaching youngsters via a visual communications device. And this was just 7 years after TVs were first mass marketed to the public in 1946. So it's because of all these innovations, we are communicating here. If this was prior, some of the, like, let's say even television, just being able to speak wirelessly and direct to you is it's just really something to be thought about. Anyway, in a few minutes, I'm also going to be showing you some slides of my works from way back to the present. So if you have any questions, like Bella mentioned, feel free to ask, and I will try to answer them as we go along. So, and also please keep your questions relevant. So anyway, I came to Rochester, like Bella mentioned, in 1971 via Toronto. I lived in Toronto for 2 years. And then I met someone from Rochester, and I made the move to Rochester then. At first, I was involved in music, and which I was involved in music for many, many years as an onstage musician, playing guitar, some keyboards, and doing a little background singing. And I did that for quite a number of years. But after a while, I got disappointed in what was going on in the music business, and also disappointed with the musicians that I was working with. I was tired of just not making any money, to tell you the truth. And although I loved music, I didn't make much money. As an example, I was making, and I forget what year this was, I was making, I believe for 1 year, I did $32 a week was my income after all our expenses. And I rented a room for $16 a week. So if I had $1 or 50 cents for a magazine, that was a really big treat. So that kind of got old and was difficult after a while. So I decided that I needed to go back to school. And since I didn't have any money, I applied for grants, both state and federal. And I kept my fingers crossed, and I said to myself, well, if those grants come in, then that's my cue to actually proceed with going to college with no interruptions, meaning I wasn't going to be tempted to go back into just purely music again with no time for being in school. So I did get the grants, and I did go to our community college here, Monroe Community College. And when I went in for the interview, I was trying to figure out what it was exactly that I wanted to do. So I met with a counselor, and they spoke about the different programs. And at that time, there wasn't much in the media stuff. Computers were basically being used for data entry, and there wasn't any creative use for computers at all. However, there still was photography classes. They did have a multimedia course, which is what I decided on doing. And because I just didn't want to sit in a chair and do data entry. That wasn't my idea of fun. So I took a whole series of class like graphics and graphic design, printing, and photography was one of the classes. Now, photography was the last thing that I thought I would be doing for a living. I mean, I liked it. It was fun. And what I did is I challenged myself quite a bit with the projects that we were given, because otherwise they felt very static to me. So I always was trying to think out of the box to entertain myself, if not for any other reason. Luckily for me, with that in mind, I had some great teachers who were very supportive of me thinking outside of the box. And although I forget my graphics teacher's name, he was one of the most supportive, wonderful individuals that I have met. And I would do all these strange, bizarre graphic projects, and he was like really positive about everything I was doing. I do remember my photography teachers, Vince Rotella, who taught at MCC, as well as Rochester Institute there. And also Jerry LaMarche, who was the head of the multimedia department. And I have to thank all of them for their support. They were fantastic. So in just another moment or two, I'll start a slideshow. And if somebody has a question about the slides, you can certainly interject at that point if you have a question about what I'm showing you. So do you have any questions, Bella, or anything like that, or before I move on?
I'm sure you'll answer this later on in your presentation, but I know I'd love to hear about how you discovered photo sculpture and moved from 2D photography to realizing that cutting apart your photos and layering them created a much more dimensional, tangible image to look at.
Yeah, I'm going to thread all that together with the slides, and it's going to. I have an image, and I'll get to that in a second, which takes me back to something I did when I was 12 years old. I did have a whole bunch of artwork that I made during my later teens, but I lived on a farm with a bunch of musicians at that time before I came to Rochester. This was outside of, in a suburb of Detroit, and unfortunately, the farm burnt down. The main house burnt down. I lost all my artwork that I had accumulated at that point. So that was very unfortunate because I had some really, I thought I had some really cool stuff that I had gotten, but it was a shame. And after that point, everything was started anew. But like I said, and I don't know if I mentioned this, and if I did, prior to coming to Rochester, I did live in Toronto for nearly 2 years. So that was a great experience. I was involved in music, and I did a whole bunch of other things there. Like I was a disc jockey for a radio station for about 6 months, like an alternative station. And I also, believe it or not, I ran a restaurant for about 9 months. And I can tell you, and this wasn't like an official restaurant, it was actually a college restaurant. But what was interesting was after that whole experience with that, I realized what hard work restauranting was. So anyway, I'm going to open up my slides now. So give me a second. Let me go over to my iPad and we'll start. Give me a second here.
Thank you so much, Scott. Looking forward to seeing these photos.
Okay. And Bella, you can tell me everything's going fine as I connect over.
Our attendees are sorry to hear about the barn fire that destroyed so much of your early work.
Yeah, well, they say, blank happens. Let's see here, start broadcast. Okay, and
yep, you can see.
You can see that? Okay, let me switch screens. And let's go to here. And do you see that image?
Yes, we see your images.
Okay, so this is the only piece of artwork I have from when I was a kid. And I'm going to show you something, because when this was handed back to me by my parents, I had no idea how old I was when I painted this. And I was a little surprised. I'll show you the back. And it says 1962. And I was born in 1950. So I was 12 years old when I first painted this.
It's a beautiful piece.
Thank you. I mean, I wish I had more of my artwork. I had other pieces as well. But actually, the school had a show of all these, pre-teen artists who submitted stuff. And I sold a piece or two. I wish I had one of those because I can remember one in particular. And unfortunately, I don't have that, nor did I take pictures at that time. So I'm lucky I have this particular one. So let's move on. This is a okay, so I'm going to show you just a series of 4 or 5 doodles, because a lot of people just think of me as a photographer. I don't know if I'm necessarily a great drawing artist, but this was a very, very old doodle. And unfortunately, I don't know when I did this. I'm guessing I did this in my early 20s, or it might even be something a little earlier than that. But that's one piece. Okay. And so, you know, these are some more just sketches, doodles. Here's a couple dragons that I really liked. So there's that one. And let me see here. Yeah. So I liked to work in a particular medium, which was either, believe it or not, Bic pens, or in this particular case, with this little alien creature, this was all colored pencil. And I used to like to work with Rapidograph, which I'll show you in a second. But I took this into a school to show some students, and the teacher was very surprised on how vivid this was, considering I used colored pencils. And I told her it was only because I pressed down so hard in the dense regions and got this sort of really thick, vibrant color. So, so there's that. And this is some more of my doodles. This is my accordion man coming out of a cannon. Don't ask me what I was thinking, but this was a Bic pen. And this is my little guy. This was probably unfinished. This was another doodle. And there's this one. This was just a little quick watercolor doodle. You know, nothing special, but I thought it was kind of fun. So all those doodles were done probably before I got into a band. So when I came into Rochester, the first official band I was with was called October Young. And you may or may not recognize me in this. Maybe the people who do know me might recognize which one is whom. I am to the far right, okay? And this was the first time I was getting involved in music. There was no visual arts that I was doing at this point. Okay, so there were arts and crafts festival happening in town, and I used to dress up as a clown and paint children's faces. So you can say, after being in the band and before I was even going back to school again or college, I was doing art, but in a little different way. So that's me as the nicey nice clown. Now, I took my whole outfit and I changed that for Halloween. And I just thought this was fun, just to show you this next one. The next one is Psycho Clown that I went out for Halloween as.
That's quite a change.
Yes, and from, you know, oh, little casual, nicey nice to, you wouldn't want to meet me in a dark alley. So actually, what I did is I actually had a bunch of, I went to a Salvation Army and I bought all the worst mismatched clothes you could possibly imagine. And I painted my face in a very sardonic way. Okay, so when I was in MCC, besides doing projects there, I did a couple side projects. And this was actually, this may be the first 3-dimensional piece that I ever did before I was doing it with photography. This I used letter sets, some white cards that I cut by hand, and I colored the hearts with, can't remember what I used for the coloring. Each of the cards were on a separate piece of glass. So even though you can't see it here, from the far right to the left, they recede to the background. And this one's called Full House Final Play. And there's a whole story behind this. I won't get into it because it's too long, but this came as a vision of the 33 and the 3 6s. Okay, so I'll let you guys ponder on that. And then another piece I did called Community, which was just, by the way, this, okay. That one here was in 1983, okay? Wow. And then a couple years later, let's see if we can see this here. Oh, this doesn't want to spread for me. So this was, I believe this was 2 years later. And again, though you can't see it, these were very tight pieces of glass, maybe 3 layers. And I did this construction, I call it a construction, because I'm using letraset paper, I believe. And also I did some airbrushing with magic markers to get the misty effects. I also used letraset lettering to create lines and little shapes like those circles there. Okay. So anyway, that was my other kind of experience preliminarily into doing 3D work. Then when I was in MCC and I was taking photography, I started playing around just with assignments. So the band that I used to work for, which I worked simultaneously while I was in school, was called The Untouchable, which was kind of a big band, rhythm and blues, swing, rock and roll type band. So I'm not the greatest, admittedly, I'm not the greatest portrait photographer, but this was for class. I did the photography and I also did the logo design for this.
Very cool.
And this was actually to the far left on the back there is Vince, our sax player, and this was a single shot of him I did a photograph of. Again, I'm not thinking of anything in particular as far as becoming a photographer. My whole idea of going back to school was to possibly become a graphic designer. So, you know, this was somebody in my class, a classmate. I was asked to do a portrait for this young woman, and that's that. And then we started getting creative, and I had some props hanging around, and I had an old mannequin head, and I believe that's my hand back there. I don't remember. It could have been somebody from my class, and I forget what kind of machine that is. But I guess this was a project, you know, for that class. I'm not sure exactly what it was about, but. Also in the graphic design class, we were asked to do different types of things. This one's called Compliments of the Chef. And it was just kind of a fun, kind of whimsical piece, doing some colored pencil. And some of that was ink on cellophane and what have you. So there's that. I did the logo. They probably don't use it anymore for WBER. And this was the logo that I designed for them. And so there was no computers at that time. So I had to map all this WBER thing by hand. And then I created this little guy.
I love it.
The Atom guy with the mohawk. So let's see, what do we got here? And then this was, except there's a line under ambition management that actually was taped in there. I didn't have a final copy, but this was a logo designed for ambition management, which they ended up paying for and using. And I did some logo design for a few different people. I did some photography for bands. And so while I was in taking photography class, this was one of the first shots that I might call artistic. And this was actually in Florida, St. Augustine. And I liked the quietness of this. And I liked the muted tones that you're looking at, you know, around the sides. And this piece is called entrance. But to me, the entrance isn't the obvious place on the right. The entrance is the vague, sort of misty portion on the left. But that's just my interpretation. And another early piece, and by the way, these were all flat images. There was no 3D photography yet. And this is another one that's kind of more abstract, where I'm dealing with surfaces. This one's called Two Friends, and I like the color tones in this, and you know, just the oldness and corrugated rust on it and stuff. So, although this is a very modern day example of my booth, which I believe I shot just 2 years ago, my first display was made out of pegboard and PVC piping. So it was, I wish I had a picture of that, because it was completely primitive compared to the display that I'm using now. So before I was doing the photography, this is my jewelry, and it was all from pieces of photographs, and you'll notice it's maybe a little hard to tell, but it was three-dimensional. My very first piece that I made is the one in the center here, this one. And I had no idea that I would start making things after that. So this stuff was pretty early on, probably early 80s, mid 80s, somewhere around there.
Very cool.
This was a necklace that I did with mother of pearl and hematite. And I never finished this. Matter of fact, the back has to be cleaned up and finished. This was one of the last things I did before I moved on from jewelry. This is another flat image that I shot called First Light. And this one's called Escape from Buffalo, which is exactly what it was. It was a fire escape from Buffalo. This, the whole idea of this was to create movement. So I shot it at a strong angle, which you'll see in some of my other photographs as we go along. Sometimes they're just very symmetrical and static, but I wanted to create motion. So I shot it, like I said, at that particular angle. This one called Steps was in Florida. I was walking by a house, and there was a gentleman painting, an older gentleman painting his house white. And he hadn't gotten to this part of it yet. And I went up to him and I said, "Can I photograph this corner of your house?" And he looked at me thinking, like, why? And he says, "Well, you might want to wait until it's all painted, because I'm painting it nice and white." And I said, no. Can I shoot it like it is? So this has a very painting-like feeling to me. And I love the colors in that. This was a little more, when I shot this, I heard a voice in my head singing, "Someone's in the kitchen with Dinah." Okay, and that became the title. And this, incidentally, became one of my early three-dimensional pieces, which I don't do anymore, but that was one that became 3D. This was a flat image, never went to 3D, and this was out of my torn paper series. I went to a paper recycling plant and shot torn paper just like it is. This was called Waves of Grace. This is another torn paper one. This was also torn paper. And by the way, these aren't doctored up. These are just like I found them.
Wow. Scott, I have a question.
Sure.
So these flat images, there's a lot of texture in them. Are these photos that you took before you started to get into your 3D sculptures?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. That's really cool.
This was prior, except for the Dinah one. The Dinah one was a little later. But like this one was a rock formation in Arizona. Now, that's because of the wind and rain over hundreds of thousands of years sort of, smoothed it all out. But I love the movement. There's a sensuality in this piece, which I really like a lot. This is a more, just kind of a mysterious kind of feel. I think I shot this in Canada, but I like the way the light's coming in through the window and the silhouette. This one, although it's hard to tell, was an interior ceiling view of a Frank Lloyd Wright church in Phoenix, Arizona. And the colors you're seeing are actually behind each one of the V's, there's stained glass windows. And I sort of moved the camera to a position where you didn't see the stained glass windows, but you saw the colors that were coming through them. And that was shot in Prague. This is another originally intended flat image. Now, this one marks the first one that I did in 3 dimensions. I like this piece. I wanted to do this in 3D, and so I started cutting up pieces, and I only made one 3-dimensional that year. Then I started doing a whole series after that, which was wall graffiti. Now, this is from my own collection. I always liked this one. And although you can't see the 3-dimensional effect, this is all hand cut and layered.
Wow.
And then I started doing this with my photography. This is one where I had the going through the doorways, kept going further back, doing hand cutting. So this was a fairly simple piece to actually cut. Now we're going to get into today. These are pieces that I'm doing, and they're part of the Black Box series, which are the more elaborate forms. You'll see on the left all the pieces that were cut. And then this doesn't include the support systems. So there's probably, I'm guessing, about 100 pieces that were used to create the final piece that you see on the right. Same thing with the jukebox, over 100 pieces.
Wow.
Again, that's supports included. The lifters, which were of varying heights, finished on the right. This is a recent one. If you look to the top, you'll see the pieces, the separate pieces, and then you'll see the finished piece on the bottom.
Scott, I have a question for you.
Sure.
And this is from our audience. What do you use if you're willing to part with maybe a trade secret? What do you use for your support systems? Is it foam core? Is it a different material? How do you get that dimension?
Well, I use primarily foam core because it keeps the piece light. I originally tried using either glass or plexiglass, but there were issues. Clarity being one of it. If you stack too much glass, you lose clarity. Too many reflections. And also the other problem is the piece becomes extremely heavy. So I decided early on that foam core was the way I went. And I used some other plastics as well, but primarily foam core. This is a recent picture. I shot this in a lobby in Chicago. It was kind of a retro kind of hotel. And most of the screens had static on it. Some were turned off. I stuck in all pictures that I remember as a kid. These are programs that I remember. I could have, taken any programs, but, you even have the honeymooners over here or Leave It to Beaver there. And I did this in 3 dimensions, which you can't see on this particular picture.
Scott, I have a question about that one.
Okay.
Do you get this whole set together, or can people purchase individual little radios and television sets?
Well, I haven't had that request. I could, but it would probably be a special order only, and that would involve some more work. It's more intentionally done as a grouping. I hope that answers the question.
It does. Very cool.
This I shot in Florence, Italy. Again, using dynamics. Instead of shooting it straight on, I wanted to show the power and the majesty of the building, the Duomo. This one was shot in Prague. The colors were fantastic. I just love the detail in this particular piece. There's so much going on. This I did as a 3D piece. This was very complex to do as a 3D piece.
That one does look complex with all the small lines. I mean, there's just so much there to work with.
Yeah, well, it also became a pain, and I decided that I wasn't going to do it. And this one I also did a 3D. This one I believe was either Paris or Prague.
Wow.
Now this is a little different. I'm doing, if you look at it, I'm doing some distortion here. This is something I'm experimenting with. This one will become a 3D piece, but it's more, it'll have more of an abstract nature to it. Almost kind of have a slight surreal feel to it.
Is that something that you're exploring right now with your work?
I'm going to begin to do that. This is just, I'm just creating a few pieces image-wise first, and then we have to make some prototypes.
Very cool.
Okay, and I'm going to go back to the black box series. I should probably move this along a little bit. This I shot in Italy. This is a three-dimensional black box series. This was shot in Santa Fe. And I did a series, which you're going to see next, of old doors, which are great for textures, and they're good subject matter for doing 3D. That's Santa Fe. This is Santa Fe. Santa Fe. These were those little architectural blocks that were part of a wall in Santa Fe.
Wow. These are beautiful.
Thank you.
I have a question for you from the audience.
Go.
What cutting tools do you use for your work?
Okay. When we do the prototyping and when we do the initial constructs for that we sell for a little while, I know some people are going to find this hard to believe, but we use an X-Acto blade. And I say we because Laura, my assistant, is doing all the construction now. I used to do it in the beginning, but it became too big of a workload for me. And so Laura does this. She uses an X-Acto blade. Now, after a piece becomes popular, so we don't get carpal tunnel, I do have a laser and we map it up and cut it by laser afterwards if a piece becomes popular, so we don't get carpal tunnel.
Wow.
But everything still has to be stacked and glued and put together by hand, even though we do the cutting with laser at that point. But like I said, we do the prototyping and the initial, group of maybe 20 of them for by hand at first. That's another Santa Fe. Santa Fe. This was Burano Island, as well as Burano Island again. That was in Italy, Cinque Terre.
Wow, I think that one is my favorite so far. That's beautiful.
This one has quite a few layers. It's a little hard to see. I think this has about 9 different layers.
Whoa.
And the Good Old Boys, which is a series of gas pumps, which was kind of a fun piece. And this one, that was the engraving on an old mission door south of San Antonio. This was Montreal. That was upstairs at a restaurant, and I believe it was in Memphis, Tennessee. This is an old 1930s gas pump. This one's called, now I'm having a mental block, The Old Timers. And this is a group of clocks I shot in an antique window in Paris.
Wow.
They look like a family to me. This is Sonnenberg Gardens.
Oh, cool.
This was Prague. This was Prague at the Art Deco Hotel. Okay, so the next group of slides, and then I'm going to end the slide portion. This, I do digital works on dye-infused aluminum. So these are complete constructions, have little or nothing to do with photography. So this one's called Star Map, Convergence. This one's called Continuum.
Very cool.
This one's called The Dancer. This is called Sound Refraction. This one's called Underwater Symphony. And you can see some musical notes that I put in there very lightly.
Oh, nice.
So all the fish and jellyfish are coming together to see the conductor who's here. Whoop. Okay. Now, so I work in 3 basic mediums, the 3Ds, the dye-infused digital imagery, and then the last series, I'm going to briefly show you 3 pieces, is what's I call the Wisdom Tree series. And these are images and verses that I've done over the years. There's 24 in the series. They can all be seen on my website. So here's one called I Am Not a Fraction. We don't have time to read these right now, but you can read those on my site. That one's called Ascension. And this one's called A Solitary Invitation, which, by the way, is probably my most, I don't like using the word popular, but it's my most popular piece.
Wow.
Out of word series. So that ends that. Well, so let me go back to the other screen.
That was great, Scott. Thank you so much for showing us all of those photos. I feel like we really followed your journey throughout your artistic career to where you are now and today. We can see you now. Hi.
Okay.
That was great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So you're perfectly on time. We have about 15 minutes left. We do have some questions for you from the audience. So I'm just gonna go ahead and ask them if that works for you.
Yes, go ahead.
So one question we have, do you alter any of the colors in your works when you're creating them, or are they all natural colors? And you showed us that second set of works that you did that were a little bit more fantastical than standard scenery that we might see in everyday life.
When you say the second set of works, are you talking about the digital works on dye-infused aluminum?
Yes, those, and also just the colors in your original photographs. Do you alter them at all?
Okay, well, so with the digital works, all the works completely intended. So let's just sort of put that to the side. The photographs themselves are pretty close to the original scene, to the best of my remembrance. And there are a few pictures where the colors are accurate, but I'm pushing the colors. So the colors are more vibrant. But I don't do that to all the pieces. You probably remember there was like a red and a green wall after each other in the 3-dimensional box series that I did in Italy. Those I took a liberty of pushing the color more. But a lot of the old doors that I shot in Santa Fe, those were pretty much the natural colors. There might be one of them that I pushed the colors forward more.
Wow. That's impressive. The colors are so vibrant. They're beautiful. Another question we have for you, how many copies, and I'm sure it depends on each piece, but how many copies of each picture do you end up using, would you say, when you're making your layers?
Well, I bet everybody will be surprised when I said generally 2.
Wow.
I do on occasion utilize 3, and when I'm using 2, I get very inventive on how they're cut and how they're layered. Now, there are a couple trade secrets where I sort of, if I'm only using one little tiny piece of a certain layer, I might print it on a background layer where you will never see it, so I can cut that out and bring it forward. So I don't have to use a whole sheet just to do a little tiny piece. So they're like tricks of the trade that I use, but a lot of the way I approach it is by doing things that are perceptually seem to be more than what I'm actually showing you. In other words, it looks like I'm creating more layers, more sheets of paper than what you might think I'm using. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, no, that definitely was a perfect answer. Another question for you. What do you wish people knew about your artistic process?
Well, I think it depends on what I'm doing. Just to swerve off the 3D photos for just a second, the Word and the Image series were actually another part of my self coming forward, because they deal with metaphysical subjects. All of them do. And once you start reading those, you'll realize what that is. And that's not for everybody. That's for, only a certain audience is probably going to be attracted to them. The digital images, which are way more abstract than any of the other things I do, are just my exploration into color, shape, and form with less restriction. See, with photography, I try to find things that are within our environment. And it's sort of a challenge to myself to sort of bring that beauty forward on things that, like you mentioned earlier, things that are mundane, that we would maybe even pass by and not look at. So I'm hoping that my work increases the power of observation for people. And one of the greatest compliments that I ever got, and I've heard this a few times, is a customer came into my booth and said, since I saw your photography, I look at things in a completely different way, and in a way that enriches my life. And I thought that was really fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. Another question for you. Do you create custom pieces for customers ever? Or, is that something that you offer? Could they bring you a piece or an idea?
I did some custom work a while back. And although to some extent I did like doing that, but there was some logistical problems. One, you're creating one of a kind. And that means there's a lot more work up front. And if I were to do something even like that today, it would be very, very, very expensive. And to tell you the truth, I'm so busy with the other works that I don't even have time for that at all. And plus customers always have sort of an idea of what they want. And it was tricky. It was tricky. So honestly, I don't do custom work. I'd like to, but it's just logistically not doable.
Sure. No, that's totally understandable. I can't even imagine how complicated it is to put together these images that you take initially and then imagine how to bring them to life. Another question about your work: do you ever do multiple copies of a really popular image? For example, one of the ones that we can see at your studio today, do you ever create multiples of those, or is it kind of like a one-off?
Well,
Yeah.
Okay, so I do open editions, which means they go on as long as I want until I decide to kill them, kill that series. And I also do limited edition. Now I'm going to give you an example while we're up here. Okay, so there's the TV sets.
Very cool.
Okay,
That's fun to see in real life. Well, virtual.
Yeah, real virtual life. But you can see the three-dimensional when I sort of rotate it. And then I have a YouTube video that better illustrates this, which Bella will give you at the end of this. So anything in a white mat, they're not quite as deep as the ones in the black box series. These are kind of like, I call these the Rolls Royce of what I do. These are my standard edition. These are open edition. That means I'll do these until I, stop them on my own choosing. But these are limited edition pieces because these ones are more elaborate. Let's see if I can.
Wow. It's so fun to watch you turn them. I mean, they really come to life. It's amazing, the work that you do.
Yeah, I'm gonna show a few of them real quick. I know we're running close to time. Here's another one.
And are all of these works available on your website?
You can see them on my website. If someone were to get in contact with me, they'd have to email me first, and then they'd have to call me by telephone if for some reason they were interested in ordering one.
Very cool.
So the black box series are limited editions, where the white matted are not. Now let me just show you a few more here. How are we doing on time there, Bella?
We have about 6 minutes left, so I think we have a couple minutes left for you to show us some works. And I have one final question for you before we say goodbye today.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask you now?
Sure.
Do you have a favorite piece that you've created?
Oh boy.
It's kind of a tough question.
That's like saying, who's your favorite child?
Right.
I have favorites. I'll have to do plural. I think, if I may, well, one of my favorites actually is this one I showed you.
That one's really beautiful.
But one I showed in a slide, let me see if where that is here. Let me switch glasses so I can see properly. Okay, and I think there's a simplicity, but the colors and textures in this are quite beautiful, and that's one you saw.
Yeah, that one is beautiful. And it's nice with the glass too. I can imagine how much more beautiful it would be to look at it in person.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm getting too many reflections here in the room. I do use, in the black box series, I use more expensive materials. Like I use museum grade anti-glare glass made by TrueView. The backgrounds are actually a black suede matting. Wow. So they're more expensive than just my standard edition, which are the white matted ones. So this is one of my favorite. Let me see if I'll try to grab maybe just one more. And before you tell me, I'm going to sign off in a second. Oh God, there's so many of them. I mean, yes, this one you saw.
That one's great. The colors in that one are just mind-boggling.
Plus, this has a ton of parts in it. Now, this one I pushed the color a little bit because I really wanted those colors to come forward.
Well, Scott, we're just about out of time, and I'd love to share your information with our visitors today so that they know how to get in touch with you to learn more about your work. Thank you again so much for spending this hour with us and showing us your journey as an artist and telling us about your work. It was a really special program that we had with you today. I'm just going to share my screen real quick so that I can put Scott's information up for all of you. So be sure to support Scott Artifacts online. You can contact him directly to purchase from him and to place any orders that you have. Here's his phone number, his email, and his website. You could reach out to him. Like he said, it's maybe best to give him a call if you'd like to purchase one of his works. I recommend visiting his website so that you can see more of his works available. And he also has a great YouTube video about his work that shows the dimensionality to them. Since we only got to see some of them turning in person today, if you'd like to see them on YouTube, you can go to this link, which I sent in the chat as well. And be sure to check out more of what the M&T Bank Clothesline Online Festival has to offer at clothesline.rochester.edu. We have all kinds of fun things throughout the rest of the week. We have another program later today at 4:30, as well as many other programs throughout the rest of the week. You can also purchase your Clothesline t-shirt by visiting our hub. And you can also renew or purchase a membership with the Memorial Art Gallery for $15 off. That's our Clothesline special discount, and we're offering it all week long. There are a few other things that you can do if you visit our event hub, like voting for one of our artists for 2020 for the Visitor's Choice Merit Award. We're offering that, and we'll be giving that award out at the end of the week on Friday, so be sure to cast your vote. You can find the survey to cast your vote at our event hub. And we will be providing a recording of today's webinar. So if you'd like to watch again, or if you know anybody who is unable to join us live, that'll be available soon. Scott, thank you again so much for your presentation today. And thank you to our viewers for joining us.
Thank you.
And I hope to see you guys throughout the rest of the week.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Scott. Bye, everyone.